Alright, so unfortunately the beginning of this video was corrupted, so I have to redo the introduction here. But basically this is going to be a quick little mini-series I'm doing where I go over all the perks for both Killer and Survivor, and just kind of give a quick strategy on maybe who you might want to use it on, how you might want to be using it in certain situations. And it'll probably be about 4 videos for Killer and 4 videos for Survivor ideally. So definitely keep an eye out for that. First of all, we have Nurse's Calling. In my opinion, this is one of the better tracking perks in the game. It allows you to see where people are healing. That means the person that's healing and the person that's healing them. So, essentially, if 3 people are healing, you'll see all 3 of them. If there's only 2 of them healing, you'll see 2. If there's a person healing themselves, you'll see that it's only 1 person at a time. So Nurse's Calling provides you information, and it works really effectively with stealth killers, such as the Pig, Wraith, Ghostface. In particular, on the Pig, for example, I like running it with Whispers and Monitor and Abuse, meaning that with those other 2 perks, I'll be able to see whenever Whispers kicks on. I can just crouch right away because I know that soon I'll be walking into the 28-meter range of somebody that's most likely healing, and Monitor and Abuse just gives me that bit of extra room to try and get close to them so I can get an easy hit onto whoever's being healed, or perhaps even just go for an injure on whoever's healing them. Nurse's Calling helps you provide map pressure by giving information of where everyone is on the map. Agitation is... I personally like Agitation, but it really isn't the best perk on paper. What Agitation does is whenever you pick somebody up to start taking them towards a hook, you move 18% faster than you would normally when you were carrying them, and your tear radius also gets increased by 12 meters. So that tear radius increase doesn't really mean much. There's very few times where you can actually take advantage of that. You might want to try and use something like Kalra Phobia from the clown with it, because that could help deny some of the healing pressure around you. But it really isn't the best. It really isn't the use for this perk. Generally, you want to use Agitation on really aggressive killers like Hillbilly or Nurse, so you can spend as little time hooking people and as much time chasing people instead. Next perk is Barbecue and Chili, and this is probably one of the most used perks in the game. This perk lets you see, whenever you hook somebody, it lets you see any survivors that are 40 meters away from you, as long as they don't have Distortion, the perk, or they're not hidden in the locker. So it's very similar to Nurse's Calling in that it lets you see where people are on the map, except this activates for every survivor outside of 40 meters, and uh, and well, the main reason I like using Barbecue is for the second part of the perk. What it does is, for every time you hook an individual survivor, it'll give you 1 stack. So if you hook the same survivor 3 times, it won't give you 3 stacks. It'll only give you that 1 stack because you have to hook different survivors. And for every stack that you get 25% extra blood points at the end of the game, not during the game like some of the other perks give you. Because during a game, the maximum blood points you can get, period, is 32,000. Barbecue and Chili breaks that limit and lets you go past it. It lets you go up to double your blood points. So if you have Barbecue and Chili only as your only form of getting extra points, then Barbecue and Chili can let you get all the way up to 64,000 blood points. So it's really good for that whole just grinding blood points out. Bitter Murmur. I think Bitter Murmur is an underrated perk personally. Again, it's an aura tracking perk like Nurse's Calling, like Barbecue and Chili. But the way Bitter Murmur works is whenever a generator is repaired, any survivors within 16 meters of the generator get revealed to you for 5 seconds. Now, this isn't always helpful, and that's why you don't really see too many people running it, because sometimes you'll be in the middle of a chase when a generator pops, and you won't be able to go punish whoever you see on Bitter Murmur. But at the end of the game, it reveals all survivors, no matter where they are, for 10 seconds. That's huge, especially at the higher ranks where generators tend to go a little bit faster. Um, it it does help you out a lot in figuring out what direction you want to try and go to set up for maybe an end game play, or maybe you want to try and cut somebody off from going to unhook or something like that. Bitter Murmur allows you to do that towards the end of the game when it's most crucial that you have knowledge of where everyone is on the map. Blood Echo is one of the newer perks. I don't really like this perk that much. It's good on some killers like Plague, like Legion maybe. Essentially what it does is whenever you hook somebody, everyone who's injured suffer from hemorrhage, so they bleed a little bit more, and exhaustion. Exhaustion is the main part that you care about with this perk, because although you can track people by their blood, it usually isn't as helpful as the exhaustion part of this. Because obviously, if survivors are exhausted, they can't use perks like Sprint Burst, like Dead Hard, like Lithe, and those are really strong perks that let survivors get away from tricky situations. Blood Echo does kind of counter it, but unless you have a way to get to the survivors that are affected by Blood Echo, it doesn't really get that much value. And if they're healthy, then they don't get affected at all. And then on top of all of that, Blood Echo also has a cooldown of 60 seconds, so you can only do this once a minute, and that's if people are injured on the map, and if you can get to them. That's the only time you're really going to get value out of it, so I don't think this perk is that great. Now, Blood Warden. Blood Warden it's a hard perk to pull off, but if you can get a great play of Blood Warden, it'll completely tear apart a team. So, as soon as an exit gate is opened, a killer can use Blood Warden. So what Blood Warden does is, whenever somebody gets hooked, if there's any open exit gates, the entity will just block it off straight up. Survivors can't run out, they can't do anything, they'll be blocked in just like the killer is. And that happens for 60 seconds. So with Blood Warden, you want to be trying to you want to hope that the doors are open and wait towards the latter end of the endgame collapse timer, and you can potentially just lock all 4 survivors in and kill them all with the endgame collapse. That's something that people do a lot. They think it's really entertaining. It's hard to pull off, but when you do pull it off, it is pretty satisfying to see that all 4 survivors get taken by the entity at the same time. But Blood Warden also has a passive effect where whenever people are hiding, or whenever people are standing within the gate at all, you can see where they are. So that way, if somebody's just camping the gate, healing themselves and waiting, you know that, hey, that person literally isn't helping at all. I can continue chasing somebody else. So Blood Warden has its uses, but it's a very niche perk, although it is fun when it gets pulled off. And Blood Warden actually is one of the main reasons people don't open exit gates right away. That's why you want to 99 them instead of instead of actually completely opening them, because that'll put you at risk for Blood Warden to happen. Now, moving on to Bloodhound. Bloodhound is similar to Blood Echo in its value. The way Bloodhound works is whenever somebody's injured, in general, whenever someone's injured, they leave blood on the ground when they're running around. Now, Bloodhound makes that blood really visible for you. And when I mean really visible, I mean it's extremely bright. You can see it from very far away. And blood actually stays on the ground for a little bit longer. It stays for 4 seconds longer. So if you have trouble tracking people, Bloodhound's a great perk to help you out with that. It'll let you follow where they're moving exactly, as opposed to scratch marks, which can be inconsistent at times. Bloodhound will be very, very consistent because the blood follows people almost perfectly. Now, Brutal Strength. Brutal Strength is another pretty solid perk. It does get overshadowed by several other perks, in my opinion, and just several killers in general. But Brutal Strength, on paper, it's a great perk. It lets you break pallets and break walls, break generators 20% faster. That's all it does. It's very simple, but it does help you continue the pressure while you're chasing people around. Now, Brutal Strength is generally better on killers that people drop pallets early against. Someone like Clowns, someone like Doctor maybe. Even a tier 3 Michael. People will generally drop pallets a little bit earlier against those killers because they're worried about either getting hit or getting downed. So Brutal Strength works with them pretty well. Now, Kalra Phobia. Kalra Phobia, I don't really know how this word is pronounced, but this perk is extremely mediocre. When it works really well. It provides a ton of pressure if you can get it to work how you want. But the thing is, it only works within your heartbeat range. So Kalra Phobia, what it does is, if somebody's within your heartbeat range, any healing at all will be cut by 50%. So just like that, if somebody's trying to pick someone off the ground, that'll be 50% slower. If they're trying to reset and just heal each other, 50% slower. If somebody's healing themselves, 50% slower, but only in your heartbeat range. So to get value out of Kalra Phobia, usually you need to bring more perks to benefit it, and at that point you're committing a lot of perks to a very specific situation. So this perk really isn't that great. If it was map wide 50%, that'd be extremely strong, and it'd probably be kind of broken. But that way, Kalra Phobia would actually get valued, and just the way it works right now, it's not really the best perk at all. Now, Cruel Limits, this perk had the potential to be really cool, but unfortunately it really just isn't. So every time a generator is finished, all the windows within 24 meters of that generator get blocked for 30 seconds. So whenever you're a survivor, if you run through a window 3 times within one chase, this entity will just block off the window, they can't use it anymore. Cruel Limits just does that to all the windows within 24 meters of a generator. The thing is, usually if you finish a generator, the killer isn't that close to you to begin with. So right away, the killer just doesn't really get that much value out of it. It's only 30 seconds that they're blocked for, and on top of that, most maps have pallets near windows too. So the thing is, Cruel Limits, even though it blocks off the windows, yes, it can shut down some strong areas, but more likely than not, you're really just not going to be able to get value out of it. You might even be chasing someone else, like I said before with Bitter Murmur. If you're chasing someone else, then Cruel Limits gets basically 0 value. So this perk, it'd be a lot better if it was 24 meters from where the killer is, because that could potentially shut down a loop while somebody's getting chased. But unfortunately, within 24 meters of the completed generator, just doesn't do that much. Now, Dark Devotion, this is a really cool perk. It's kind of hard to get value out of sometimes, and smart survivors will know how to counterplay it. But the way it works is, Dark Devotion will grant you an obsession in the game. So even if they don't have Decisive Strike or another perk that would make someone an obsession, Dark Devotion makes them one. Makes one, sorry. And as the killer, whenever you basic attack, so just your regular smack with whatever weapon you have, Dark Devotion will actually transfer your terror radius onto them, and then you get 0 terror radius whatsoever. So the survivor will run around with your heartbeat range, whatever it was. It's a 32 meter terror radius, so it doesn't really get affected by perks like Distressing or killers with smaller terror radius. So for 30 seconds, you will have no terror radius, and you'll be able to go anywhere on the map. And a big strategy for Dark Devotion is you can smack your obsession, and then immediately just turn around and walk in the other direction. So they'll be keeping your heartbeat range, and most survivors don't expect this perk because it's not very commonly used. But you can definitely just get some jump scares out of it. You can be a trapper with 0 heartbeat range. You can be a hillbilly with 0 heartbeat range. What are they supposed to do whenever you walk up 2 feet behind them and start revving your chainsaw? There's nothing they can do if they're not expecting this perk. And this perk also allows you to punish borrowed time saves really effectively, because since you don't have a heartbeat range, borrowed time doesn't actually trigger. So Dark Devotion is great for counterplaying against really, really aggressive and excuse me, it really helps with very altruistic and very clumsy teams that don't know what's going on around the map. So this is definitely one of those perks that you have to make sure you're actively trying to get value out of. You need to smack your obsession, just go do something else. Let the obsession heal up. It doesn't matter what they do, as long as you're away from them, you're completely silent for 30 seconds. Now, Deadman Switch. This perk, people have tried to get a lot of value out of this perk before, but unfortunately it just hasn't really been the best perk of all time. Essentially what you do with this perk, whenever you hook your obsession, the perk activates for 45 seconds. So for those 45 seconds, if any generator at all stops being worked on, then the entity will just block it, just like Thrilling Tremors would. It'll just put its claws around the generator and it won't let it be worked on, period. So Deadman Switch, in theory, is a really good perk. The thing is, whenever the entity blocks off a generator, it doesn't regress at all. So even if you've kicked the generator, they won't keep going back. If you have a perk like Ruin, it doesn't keep going back. So all Deadman Switch does is block off the generator for up to 45 seconds. And that's something I hadn't talked about just yet either. It only blocks off generators for however much time is remaining from those 45 seconds after you've hooked somebody. So at most you'll get about 45 seconds of Deadman Switch value, but in that time the generator won't be regressing, and survivors can literally just wait it out if they want to. Now, the next perk, Distressing. This is a bad perk. Just straight up, this is probably the first distinctly bad perk that we have. Most of the other perks that we've gone over so far have some sort of value. Distressing literally just it bumps up your terror radius by a little bit, and that's it. You get a little bit more points for deviousness actions, but at the end of the day, you don't really need those blood points for deviousness action. Like I said before with barbecue, there's a lot of perks that give extra blood points, but that's only in game. That's up to that 32,000 blood point cap. So unfortunately, Distressing just isn't a good perk. Bumping up your terror radius only ever really is effective. Is only really effective with certain perks like Kalra Phobia or Overwhelming Presence, something like that. But at the end of the day, you can just run other perks over it that will increase the heartbeat range even more. Dying Light, man. Dying Light used to be absolutely insane, and they did change it a few months back. Now, I don't disagree with the reason to change it. It was the way Dying Light used to work was if you killed your obsession at any point in the game, all generator and all healing speeds would be cut in half just right there, right away. Nothing anybody could do about it. So, of course, what ended up happening with Dying Light was a killer would tunnel Dying Light and kill them right away and just try and get that 50% as fast as possible. Now, this is clearly really toxic. That's why they changed the perk. So the way it works now is whenever, just right off the bat, your obsession does everything 33% faster. Does healing actions 33% faster. Healing also including unhooking and trying to pick people up off the ground, whatever it is. Dying Light lets the obsession do that a third faster. Now, what the killer gets from this is every time you hook somebody that isn't the obsession, you get one token, one stack. And for every stack you have, everybody starts doing stuff 3% faster. That's healing, sabotaging, repairing, whatever it may be. It's going to be 3% slower. So, in theory, this sounds like a good perk, but when you start thinking about it, that's 3% per hook on somebody that isn't the obsession. So say you don't have any way to transfer the obsession to somebody else. That's a maximum of 9 hooks, which means that it'll be about 27% slower for everybody. But at that point, if you have 9 hooks, then that means 3 people are dead, most likely. And what? So you're just gonna make the obsession do stuff a little bit slower? Dying Light really isn't that effective. And then on top of all of that, if the obsession dies at any point for whatever reason, you just lose all your stats. You don't lose your stats, but Dying Light just turns off. You don't get the value out of it at all. You can't even just kill your obsession to keep whatever stacks you're at, and then have that for the rest of the game, similar to how Save the Best for Last works. Dying Light, it's very difficult to get value out of. The only time I like running it is with other general aggression perks like Phobia, or even healing slowdown perks like not Phobia, sorry, like Thanatophobia, something like, I already said Thanatophobia, I'm sorry. Something like Sloppy Butcher pairs well with it, because if you can slow down stuff with a lot of different perks, that'll start compounding into more and more slowdown. but on its own, Dying Light just isn't very good. Now, Franklin's Demise. This is this is a bit of a toxic perk, in my opinion. It's a perk that I think killers should always have available in their arsenal. It's not a bad perk at all. So what Franklin's Demise does is whenever you do a basic attack on somebody, so just like the regular smack, if they have an item, they'll drop their item and it'll lose a bit of charges on it. Now before, whenever the way items used to work, you might have actually been able to break an item with Franklin's Demise. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. But what you can do with it still is you can hit somebody and try and keep in mind where they dropped their item, because they might be coming back to the item later, after maybe they get unhooked or something like that. Franklin's Demise just basically, it punishes people for having items, and it'll make them end up wasting time trying to go back and get their items. So if you see a bunch of flashlights, a bunch of toolboxes, a bunch of medkits, you can bring Franklin's Demise, and those will be way less valuable overall. Now we move on to Furtive Chase. Furtive Chase is kind of similar in value to something like Blood Echo, where really the effect it has isn't really helpful in most situations. So the way Furtive Chase works is every time you hook your obsession, you get 1 stack, 1 token, all the way up to 4 tokens total, kind of like barbecue and chili. But the thing Furtive Chase does is whenever you get 1 token, you get 4 less meters in your terror radius while you're chasing somebody. So what that means is while you're in a chase with, let's say, a Dwight, you'll have 4 less meters on your terror radius if you have 1 stack. But that Dwight wouldn't care about the 4 less charities, or the 4 less meters, because he's being chased by you. And then when you lose that chase, your terror radius goes back up to normal. So unfortunately, Furtive Chase, that part of Furtive Chase just doesn't work that well at all. Now before the Oni came out with his perk Nemesis, something Furtive Chase was good for though, was changing the obsession around. So whenever you hook the obsession, you get a stack, and whoever unhooks the obsession then becomes the obsession. So what you could do was move whoever had the obsession in your game. You could change it from whatever survivor unhooked that Dwight that you're chasing, that it would become them that has the obsession in that situation. Next is Devour Hope. Now Devour Hope is one of those really cool perks where it has the potential to be absolutely game winning right away. Or well, not right away, once you start building up stacks for it. So the way Devour Hope works is it's a lit totem around the map. This is the first hex we'll be talking about, and next in line are the rest of them. But Devour Hope lights up one of the totems around the map, and as long as that totem is up, if you are 24 meters away from a hook whenever somebody gets unhooked, you get 1 stack for Devour Hope. Now, at 2 stacks, you get 5% faster movement speed for 10 seconds after you hook somebody. So essentially, you can hook somebody, and for 10 seconds, you move a little bit faster. You can get started in a chase a little bit faster. It helps you out in continuing to keep the pressure snowballing up and up in your favor. Next, at 3 tokens, this is a main set of stacks that you want to be looking for. 3 tokens for Devour Hope. That'll let you one-hit anybody with any killer whatsoever. So if I'm playing a Wraith, for example, and I have 3 tokens of Devour Hope, everybody's one-shot to me. So I can just smack them down to the ground immediately. I don't have to worry about having to hit them twice. Now, what some smarter survivors will do against Devour Hope is they'll stay injured. Because there's no point, at least until the tone is broken, there's no point to healing at all, because you're going to be one-shot anyway. That way, if you're injured, you can use perks like Dead Hard to great effect. So that's definitely something you have to keep an eye out for with Devour Hope. If somebody's staying injured, it's very likely that they're either just making a smart play or they have Dead Hard, so you have to keep an eye out for that. Now, at 5 stacks, this is where Devour Hope gets really fun. Now, generally, to Mori somebody, you have to hook them, or they have to be the last person alive. But Devour Hope completely changes that. If you can get her all the way up to 5 stacks, whenever you smack anybody down at all, it doesn't matter if you've hooked them, it doesn't matter if it's the first time you've seen them the entire game, you can just kill them right then and there. You can use your Mori animation on them, and it'll have you'll have no fear whatsoever until the totem is broken. All of these effects persist. So until it's broken, you get your 5% extra speed after 10 seconds after hooking a survivor. Then you'll get your one-shots, you'll get your ability to Mori right there on the ground whenever you want to, until the totem's broken. So Devour Hope is one of those totems that it doesn't actually show up on the survivor screen that you have it until you start getting your one-shots with the 3 tokens. So a strategy for Devour Hope is before you get those 3 tokens, you might want to try and down 2 people, so that right away you can go from having 2 tokens to having 4. So you only have to down 1 other person after that to try to get your 5th stack. Devour Hope is a really strong perk, and it's something that survivors are definitely going to be looking out for when they realize you have it. Now, Hex Haunted Grounds. This is a pretty strong hex too. Basically it spawns 2 trapped hex totems as opposed to just one of them, like most other hexes. And what Hex Haunted Ground does is if you break either of it will randomize whatever totems you have. So if you have 3 different totem perks, 4 different totem perks, a random 2 of those totems will, if survivors break them, it'll make them one shot for 60 seconds. That's all it does. But it's almost like a booby trap for totems, and it's a really fun perk whenever it triggers right before you hit somebody. It's one of the most satisfying feelings in the game, and this is just a solid perk if you want to run a totem build. Now, this is going to be the last perk we talk about in this video. Huntresses Lullaby is another hex totem. Oh, sorry, I should point out that with Haunted Grounds, when you break one of the trap totems, the other one will go back to being a regular dull totem, so you can't just get 2 60-second windows of one-shotting people. Now, with Huntresses Lullaby here, this is kind of similar to Dying Light, in that you have to build up stacks for it to actually start getting value. So with Huntresses Lullaby, every time you hook somebody, you get 1 stack, and from 1 to 4 stacks, what those tokens do is it'll make it so that the time between the little ding that survivors hear and the skill check popping up gets shorter and shorter, all the way down to 4 tokens. It'll pretty much be a ding, and then immediately the skill check will start going, instead of being, oh, you'll hear the ding, then like a half second, maybe almost a full second later, you'll see the skill check pop up. No, with Huntresses Lullaby, it makes that space between the ding and the skill check a lot shorter. Now, Huntresses Lullaby gets interesting at 5 tokens, because survivors don't get the ding at all. They have to be making sure that they're paying really good attention to their screen, because otherwise they won't be able to see the skill check coming in. They won't hear the ding at all, so they'll have to make sure they're watching for their screen. On top of that, Huntresses Lullaby also gives 6% regression penalty. So if any time at all, I think the totem still has to be up for this, and I'm not sure of that, but at any time at all, if a survivor misses a skill check, then it'll be reduced 6% more than it normally would. So that's also a nice side effect, but keep in mind, these effects only persist while the totem is still up.